right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I want to give a huge shout out to start to all of our classrooms who are registered to join us today or to tune in to the broadcast later next week. It's so great to have you here with us, especially in the month of February. So we've been doing this for 10 years now, and every February we do the same thing. We kick all the men out for the month, and we host incredible women in science, exploration, conservation, and adventure throughout February. So it's been jam-packed. We're just over halfway through February now, but there's still a lot of live lesson action coming your way. So if you head to exploringbytheseat.com, you can find all the lessons coming up. We'll be announcing March event shortly as well. So it's always great to have your classrooms with us, and we can't wait to see more of you coming along. We already have some groups saying hey via the YouTube chat, so don't be shy to use that chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. I can see we've got Caesar tuning in from Nicaragua. We've got Miss Koth's 4th grade class in California. So don't be shy. Use that chat sidebar. And of course, as questions come to mind, put them in there as well. And a shout out to our camera classrooms who are hiding out backstage. We'll bring you in shortly. And I know that you're going to have lots of great questions for us. So what are we up to today? Today, we're going to spend a little time with NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. So prior to becoming an astronaut, Jessica's career as a scientist focused on the physiology of animals in extreme environments. So in 2019-2020, she served as flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expedition 61 and 62 and participated in the first all-female spacewalk, which is pretty cool. During this mission, the crew contributed to hundreds of experiments in fields like biology, earth science, human research, and technology development. Jessica spent 205 days in space. She orbited our planet 3,280 times. So that's 86.9 million miles. Pretty cool. So joining us backstage, let's get her in here now, is Jessica. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hello. Hey, Joe. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. It's so great to have you here live with us, Jessica. We have so many classrooms. They're going to flood the zone with questions. We're going to play some Kahoot. But first, I know you've got some slides so we can get to know you a little better and see some of your experiences leaving our planet.
All right. Yeah. Welcome to all of the classrooms all over. It's awesome that all of you could join. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about myself and my journey to becoming an astronaut and show you a cool video as well. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So this one I call Experimenting in Microgravity, Full Circle for a Physiologist Turned Astronaut. And I think you'll understand that title a little bit more as we go on with the slides. I first started saying that I wanted to be an astronaut when I was 5 years old. I grew up in a small town in northern Maine, and this is a view of that area from the International Space Station. This is actually Caribou, Maine, where I grew up, and can keep on advancing the slides. And one more time, keep going. Yeah. So for the time that I was 5 years old, I started saying that I wanted to be an astronaut. My first adventure into microgravity research was actually when I was an undergraduate at Brown University. So from that time that I was a child, my mom tells me I was 5 when I first started saying I wanted to be an astronaut. And I think for me, it was this fascination with the world around me and trying to understand more about nature and biology. Biology was my favorite subject from the time that I was a young child. So I was really trying to pursue both of those paths in parallel. My interest in the biological sciences and nature and the world around me, and then sort of trying to combine it with this love for space. So this was an example of what we did when I was an undergraduate. We designed an experiment that was actually comparing conventional suturing. So if you cut yourself and you need to go to the hospital or have a doctor give you stitches, we were comparing doing that with a normal suturing technique versus just using like a super glue, which was new at the time. We designed this experiment and actually got to carry it out on what we call the Vomit Comet, which is an airplane that flies in a series of parabolas. So it actually achieves about 30 to 35 seconds of weightlessness. A little bit different than the sustained weightlessness that we have in space, but it was a pretty good start. So from that, I'm going to try to explain these different transitions in my life. And the first one I call from being a student scientist to being a science coordinator. And this was when I left my role as a student scientist and really got my first job. I was working here at the NASA Johnson Space Center, and I was coordinating life science experiments. So the types of experiments in science that are done on astronauts. I wasn't an astronaut at the time, so I was coordinating these experiments for other astronauts. Here you can see me training Pedro Duque, a Spanish astronaut, how to use the ultrasound that was on board the International Space Station. Next, my next transition was from being that science coordinator to becoming a scientist myself. I actually had an incredible time working here at the Johnson Space Center for 3 years. I had a lot of incredible opportunities where I got to live underwater in a habitat to serve as kind of a comparison environment for the space environment. I did more of those parabolic flights that I described, and I really had a lot of incredible opportunities. But at the time, I'd always planned on going back to school. I really enjoyed coordinating other people's science, but I was thinking, man, I want to do my own science. I want to think about my own scientific questions that I have that I want answered. And I started just doing some research on the internet to try to find different areas that I was interested in. And I found an area of research called diving physiology. There were a group of researchers at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California that were studying really interesting animals like deep diving emperor penguins and seals, and trying to understand how these animals did the things that they did. So I actually left my job at NASA to go back to school and to become a graduate student working on these remarkable animals. The types of experiments we did, first of all, we worked on emperor penguins. And this was because we were really intrigued by the animals that could dive for incredibly long periods of time. You may be familiar with emperor penguins. They became pretty popular over the recent years for a lot of their behaviors that they exhibit when they're on the surface of the ice. Like, for example, when they have their eggs, when they're sitting on their eggs and their chicks in these very harsh climate of the Antarctic. But I was actually more interested in their underwater behavior and how they support all of the different diving that they do. These birds are the top diver of any other bird. They can hold their breath for 30 minutes. So imagine holding your breath for 30 minutes, more than the time I'll be talking to you today. Don't advise trying it because you won't be successful like these animals are. But they are air-breathing breath hold divers. So the idea was, we wanted to study these animals to understand what was special and unique about their physiology that allows them to accomplish these incredible behaviors. We put different backpack recorders on these animals and collected the data while they were diving in their environment. And I was fortunate enough to dive there as well. We also did experiments on another animal, the elephant seal, and this is an iconic diver as well, but in the seal world, they're by far the best diver. I mentioned emperor penguins can hold their breath for 30 minutes. Elephant seals can hold their breath for 2 hours. So again, they're air-breathing animals just like us, but they can hold their breath for 2 hours. How do they do that? And they're not just down there underwater resting. They're actually actively foraging, finding food, moving all around. All of these things require a lot of oxygen, but they can do that while holding their breath. So extraordinary animals, and this is what really excited me and why I wanted to study them. After that, I sort of shifted away from these diving animals. I was still really interested in them, but I thought, well, wait a minute. What about animals that live at high altitudes? They're not holding their breath like a diving animal, but they're living or flying at altitudes that are so high that they might only have a half to a third the amount of oxygen that we normally have here at sea level. I was particularly interested in this bird, the bar-headed goose, and that's because this animal flies twice a year over the tallest mountains on the planet. They migrate over the Himalayas from their breeding and wintering grounds to their feeding grounds in the summer. So to accomplish this research, we had to take a totally different type of approach because we wanted to measure some of these aspects of these animals in a controlled environment. So I actually became Mother Goose. Waterfowl, like ducks and geese, actually have a very strong imprinting instinct where they think that anything that they see from the moment they hatch is their parental unit. So for me, I was with these little baby geese from the moment that they hatched, and they thought that I was their mother. This enabled us to make the animals comfortable with us, and they literally thought that I was mom. So they would be following me all around, cuddling with me as they grew, and we could put different experimental hardware on them so that they would get used to it. And the idea was to ultimately get them flying in the wind tunnel. You could see on that previous slide, before the wind tunnel was ready, we actually did a little bit of flight training with me on a motor scooter, and then we transitioned them into the wind tunnel. In this video, you can see that the goose is flying in a wind tunnel. So for a goose, flying in a wind tunnel is kind of like you walking on a treadmill. You'll kind of stay in one position, but then we can record different aspects about their bodies, what's happening to their heart rate, what's happening to the oxygen levels in their body. And in this video, you can actually see that the goose is flying in 10.5% oxygen. That's only half than what we would be breathing down here at sea level. So we were trying to understand what makes these birds successful in their very high altitude flights. So this is that next great transition when I say I went from being a scientist to now becoming a subject. As you can see, I described how I used to help facilitate experiments on other astronauts. Then I moved into doing my own experiments on all these animals. And finally, with me as an astronaut, I'm now the one that's being poked and prodded in the name of science because I'm on the other end. And I feel like it's really just me paying my dues. It's my turn to give back and be poked and prodded in the name of science. Here you can see I'm drawing a blood sample from my previous mission on the International Space Station. And you can see that we're very heavily instrumented for various experiments, kind of just like the animals, the seals and the penguins and the geese that I described. This is an experiment called cerebral autoregulation, where we're trying to understand what happens to blood flow to the brain in the microgravity environment. Here's another experiment where I'm using the ultrasound. This is an old picture from back when I was training people how to use the ultrasound. And here is me in 2020, 17 years later, when I'm using that ultrasound doing this physiology study. So with this last transition of me going to becoming a subject on the International Space Station, I wanted to transition the talk to show you a few of the highlights in video form of what it's like to train and launch and live on board the International Space Station. So Joe will roll the video. I launched on the Soyuz spacecraft, so it's the Russian capsule and rocket that you can see here beside me. Here we are getting ready to board the rocket. I'm with my Russian commander Oleg Skripochka and also Hazza Ali El Mansouri, who is the very first astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. The different segments of the rocket fall away when we've used all the fuel. And that's actually a picture that Christina Koch, my colleague, took of our rocket approaching from the International Space Station. And here's our view as we approach the space station for docking.
I confirm the contact.
Astronaut Jessica Meir making her first flight to the station.
You can see I was really happy. I think I was smiling that big for the entire 7 months.
Coming in through the hatch and seeing all these familiar faces feels like home already. It's going to be an amazing 6 months.
Of course, the best part about living in space is being weightless all the time, 24 hours a day, when you can just spin around, you can shoot off down the module, you can float, even your food floats. Here I am preparing a little charcuterie board, but most of our food, of course, is rehydrated. It's dehydrated and we add water back to it and warm it up. A lot more fun, even just to play with your food in space, of course. This is just water. Even water, because of the surface tension of water and the lack of gravity. And exercise is a very important part of our day. We have a weightlifting machine, and we also have a treadmill and a cycle ergometer. And this is because if we don't exercise every day, we'll lose a lot of muscle mass and a lot of bone density, because without the loading that we have here on Earth, our bones and muscles can't stay healthy. Even brushing your teeth and getting ready for bed is more fun in space. We were up there for a lot of holidays like Halloween and some commemorative holidays, anniversaries for the Apollo missions. Of course, you can have a little bit of downtime too to celebrate holidays and hang out with your crew. But of course, the most important thing that we're doing up there is science. We are conducting scientific experiments pretty much on a daily basis, ranging from combustion science, even flames burn differently in space, all types, basically every type of science. We're doing chemistry experiments, physics experiments, biology experiments. Here we're loading the airlock in the Japanese module, and we're launching some small satellites into orbit. We grew lettuce during my mission to understand more about how we can grow crops for future long-duration space missions. Super exciting to have a little bit of a fresh salad while we're up there as well. This is the life sciences glove box, doing different types of cell studies, bone cells, muscle cells. And here's a large-scale physiology study where we were trying to understand more about the fluid shifts that happen in our human body in the space environment. This is our freezer for our samples. We did a lot of spacewalks during my mission. We did 9 spacewalks in a 4-month period, which is really a lot more than normal. Usually we only do 0 or 1 or 2 in that time frame. This is some footage from the first all-female spacewalk that I was fortunate enough to be a part of with my colleague Christina Koch.
For you here in a couple hours when you get home. Have a great EVA.
Drew, thank you so much. Thank you, Drew. Thank you so much.
With Luca Parmitano, he is flying the robotic arm that you'll see Christina's on the end of here during the spacewalk. For these spacewalks, we were upgrading the batteries on the International Space Station to some newer lithium-ion batteries. Spacewalks are definitely the most challenging thing that we do, both physically and mentally, but I'd say the most rewarding too, because the view that you get when you're out there, just you alone in your spacesuit, is really incredible. How do we get all the supplies that we need on the International Space Station? We have a few different types of cargo vehicles that come up to the space station. There's no crew inside. They're just full of experimental hardware, food, clothes, everything that we need to live and work up there. And we use the Canadarm to actually reach out and grab those vehicles and pull them into the space station to unload the hardware. Sometimes we get fresh fruits and vegetables as surprises in these cargo vehicles, and it makes us pretty happy. When we're done with these vehicles, we actually fill them full with our trash, and they burn up in the atmosphere, with the exception of the SpaceX Dragon, which can splash down in the ocean if we want to return any particular experimental supplies. You can guarantee at any downtime during a day, there'll be at least somebody in the cupola looking out at the most incredible views of Earth. And we also use these windows for science because we can take photographs through the windows that we're regularly passing over the same areas. So we can do things like take pictures of the glaciers over time, and we can help monitor the retreat of glaciers, and we can give those images down to scientists to help them with their research. The views really never get old. The Earth is so incredibly beautiful. Here you can see the coast of Israel. Those are lightning flashes at night. This is how city lights look at night. And here we're coming up over Africa, and you see all the lights along the Nile, and that's the city of Cairo. That was the coast of Israel. Those greenish lights are actually squid fishing boats off of Thailand. And these ethereal glow of green, those are the northern and southern lights, which are so incredible to see. A Unfortunately for me, 205 days went by way too quickly. I was not ready to leave. I think I would have much rather stayed for a year or more, maybe. It never got old for me. It was so incredible every day of the week. But it was time for our capsule to leave. Also a very interesting time since it was April of 2020. We had been up there as COVID really raged across the planet, and we saw it all happen from space. So we were really coming back to a completely different planet. This is what it looks like out of the window next to my head as you're really burning up in the atmosphere, but thankfully protected by your heat shield. And you touch down kind of in the middle of nowhere in Kazakhstan. The Russian search and rescue forces are there on the scene very quickly to help pick you up. And we're back on our NASA airplane, back in Houston in only about 24 hours after touching down. So pretty incredible, especially given the situation with COVID around the world. So from there, I just wanted to go back to the slides and show you a few more things. You know, I think for me, what this journey for me has really been all about is, first of all, identifying your passion. For me, as I mentioned, that passion was biology combined with the exploration from space. And the interesting part is that everybody needs to define their own path. You know, sometimes people will ask us, what's the best way to become an astronaut? And there is no one path, no one right way. The idea is that you need to find your passion and define your path in getting there. And then you need to accept that you'll fail along the way as well. If we aren't willing to put ourselves out there and take a risk, then we won't truly be successful and find those rewards. So for me, I told you my passions were biology and space exploration, but your dreams may be entirely different, and there are so many paths towards achieving your goals. The opportunities are out there, and by engaging in types of opportunities like the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants series, you have the tools that you need. You are gaining all the knowledge, and you are well on your way. So just to illustrate that, of all these different backgrounds and paths that are possible, I wanted to just introduce you to the rest of my classmates. We were selected back in 2013. There were 8 of us, 4 women and 4 men. And although we all had the same dream of becoming an astronaut, we all took entirely different paths. For example, there's Anne McLean. She was a test pilot in the Army, a helicopter pilot. There's Nick Hague. He was a flight test engineer, so in the back seat of these airplanes in the Air Force. There's Victor Glover. He was a test pilot in the Navy. He flew F-18 Hornets. There's Christina Koch. She was an electrical engineer. Like me, she spent some time in the Antarctic, and she worked on the remote instrumentation in these different types of scientific settings. There's Josh Cassada. He was also a pilot in the Navy. There's Drew Morgan, who was up there with me. You saw some of the pictures in the video of Drew. He was a physician in the U.S. Army. And there's Nicole Mann. She was an F-18 pilot as well in the Marines. So as you can see, everybody took incredibly different paths, but because they followed what they were interested in and their passions, and we all ended up in the same place. So just to wrap it all up, I'm going to show you a few slides about what's happening now at NASA, and then we'll be ready for your questions. So we are flying regularly now to the space station, still with the Soyuz rocket that I launched on with the Russian Space Agency, but also with the SpaceX Dragon as well. We've been launching astronauts to the space station from Florida on SpaceX for the last few years now, and that'll be my next ride to the International Space Station. And we've had at least one partial test flight of the Boeing Starliner, and hopefully we'll be flying more with that vehicle as well. We'll be continuing with these missions to the International Space Station. When I was up there in 2020, we celebrated 20 years of the International Space Station, meaning we had a continuous human presence in space on the International Space Station for much longer than the age of most of you guys watching today, so for 20 years. And the projection is now that we'll go out to 2030 with the International Space Station. Beyond that, you've probably heard about the Artemis missions. Our plan is to go beyond low Earth orbit and return to the moon and eventually onto Mars. Here at NASA, we do things in an incremental fashion. So what we're doing now is we have the Orion capsule, and we also have the Space Launch System. So this is a capsule designed at NASA and also the rocket that will launch it. And this capsule carries 4 humans, and this is the capsule that will bring us back to the moon and hopefully onto Mars. We have our first crew, the Artemis 2 crew has been assigned. And there are 4 individuals. Some of these might look familiar. There's Christina Koch that I did my spacewalks with, Victor Glover, another classmate. We have Jeremy Hansen, a Canadian astronaut, and finally the commander, Reed Wiseman. These are the 4 individuals that are part of the Artemis 2 crew. So they'll be returning to the moon, hopefully launching early next year. And they won't be landing on the moon yet, but it'll be about a 10-day mission, and then they'll come back to the Earth. And this will be the final test that we need to really test out the capsule and the rocket and the life support system and make sure that we're ready then to make the next steps, which will be those landing missions to the moon. So with that, I just wanted to leave you with a view. Usually I show different photographs. That's a video. Usually I show different photographs and of where, views from space of where whomever I'm talking to. But since you guys are all around the country, possibly even all around the planet, I thought I'd just show one of the time-lapse imagery similar to some of the stuff that you saw in the video. So with that, we can take any questions, and we can just leave this rolling for a minute if you want to see that kind of iconic view that we see from the cupola.
All right, Jessica, thank you so much. I can see, this looks amazing just looking at it here. Let's make it full screen for a minute. But being up there, seeing everything, whizzing around our planet, seeing it without country lines, and it just must have been just an incredible experience. And I bet you can't wait to get up there and hopefully do it again.
Absolutely. It never gets old seeing your planet from this breathtaking view.
All right. Well, before we get into some Q&A action, I'm going to take the video down for now. We are going to have a little Kahoot quiz. So while you were presenting, I pulled together a few questions, a little true and false and multiple choice, to see how well our students were paying attention today. And then after that, we'll get into some Q&A action. So bear with me for a moment while I share my screen. That should come up shortly. Here we go. And if you want to join in this Kahoot action today, you need to go to kahoot.it. And then it's going to ask you for a PIN number, which is going to load right now. So kahoot.it. And then you want to put in the PIN number 958687. If you're in a classroom and you have a tablet, or maybe a laptop or phone, you can shout out your answers to him or her. If you're joining from home, scan that QR code with a phone or tablet, and it'll bring you right in. If you can't join us with tech, that's no big deal. You can follow along and see how you do. And we've got lots of groups joining us. So while we let this kind of happen, I'm going to grab a couple questions from the chat, and I'll grab a couple questions from some of our camera classes. So let's see. Let's start off with... Oh, okay. Here's a good one. So Miss Cott's crew's tuning in. And they're wondering, so Hadash is wondering, if you want to become an astronaut, is math and science important in elementary school?
I would say yes, math and science is definitely important. As you saw the different paths that my colleagues and I all took, the possibilities are very wide-ranging for terms of what kind of experience you need for an astronaut. But the one thing that we all have in common is a STEM degree. So those math and science skills are really important for all the different types of careers that lead to becoming an astronaut.
All right. I think that was maybe some hopeful students that they could maybe leave math and science behind for a little bit. Miss Gray's crew would like to know, when the rocket leaves the atmosphere, how fast is it traveling?
It's traveling very, very fast. So we are actually in space within 8 minutes. So 8 minutes, you're already out in space, and then you're traveling at about 17,500 miles per hour to reach that low Earth orbit. That's the speed that you're traveling in that orbit. So 17,500 miles per hour, that's 5 miles per second. That means that we go around the entire planet every 90 minutes.
All right. Let's see. Let's bring in a camera classroom here. We still have lots of students joining us. We've got Erskine Public School joining us in Ottawa. So they're in audio class today. If you want to go ahead and unmute and ask that question,
we'd like to know if Jessica got shorter after her time in space.
Well, thankfully, I did not get shorter. Actually, what happens to many astronauts when they go to space is they get a little bit taller in space. So that's just because if we have these spaces in between our different vertebrae and our back, they're not compressed by gravity, so they can spread apart a little bit. And sometimes people's spines straighten up a little bit. Apparently, my spine was pretty straight before I launched, so I don't think I grew very much. So I didn't get shorter relative to how I launched from when I was on the ground originally, but sometimes people do get a little bit shorter from their time than compared to when they were in space.
All right, let's get one more question here before we start our Kahoot. Mayfield School is joining us from Edmonton, Alberta. How's everyone doing today?
Hi.
Right.
First question is, was it scary going into space?
No, I can honestly say I was not scared. And I think that that's true for a number of different reasons. One, we are very, very well trained. So everything that we're doing seems really, really familiar to us. And if you think about times that you might have been scared in your life, it's probably because you were in an unfamiliar environment. Something was different. It didn't seem quite the same that you were used to. And sometimes that can feel scary. But for us as astronauts, we have so much training that we know we're ready. We know what we're going to see. We can expect everything. And even if something goes wrong, we have been trained on how to react and how to deal with those types of problems. So I wasn't scared. I was just excited. I think the one thing that a lot of astronauts will say, the one fear that we have of astronauts is the fear of making a mistake, because you know that people have invested so much in you and you're so lucky to be the one going to space that you really just want to make sure that you do everything right for everybody back on the ground. You really don't want to make a mistake. But it does happen. Everybody makes mistakes, and that's okay too.
All right. Mayfield School, we'll come back your way shortly, but let's play some Kahoot now. So I know there's still a few students trickling in, but we'll get it going, and then we're just open things up. We'll start bringing in more groups, and we'll get some Q&A questions going. The quicker you put in your right answer in our Kahoot, the more points you're going to get. So let's get rolling. Multiple choice coming your way. How many days did Jessica spend in space? Was it 100, 173, 205, or 302 days in space? We got answers flying in there, over 100 already. You've got about 10 seconds to lock in your answer, and then we'll get our first look at the leaderboard. Well, answers are coming in. I'll check the chat as well to see who's saying hey to us. So there we go. 205 is the right answer. Let's jump to our scoreboard. The Yellow Raven is in that top spot. Very cool, but I think a lot will change over the next few minutes. We got a true or false coming your way. Jessica's favorite subject in school was math. Was that true or was that false? Jessica's favorite subject in school was math. You got 15 seconds to lock in true or false for that question. I'll say hi to a few more groups. We've got Oakville, Ontario. We've got California, 4th graders. We've got Everett, Ontario. All right, there we go. That's right. Biology was Jessica's favorite subject in school. The Charming Turtle still in first place. And we've got another true or false coming your way. Emperor penguins are the best divers in the bird world. What do you think? Is that true or false? We know Jessica was studying emperor penguins and elephant seals. But are they the best bird divers? Got about 7 seconds to lock in your answer. Wow, you guys are fast. Over 200 answers locked in. There we go. 30 minutes holding their breath. That's pretty incredible. You mentioned that you got to do some diving. Did you get to dive with them in Antarctica?
I did, actually. We dove at the Penguin Ranch, which is the area where we were conducting the research and letting them dive. So I was diving and they were it looked like they were performing a ballet behind me. They're really incredible to see underwater. Very
cool. Well, a quick shout out to a few more groups here in Ohio and Texas, in Brampton, Ontario, in Dundalk, Ontario, in Connecticut. We've got really a great group of students hanging out with us, and we're going to get to more of your questions shortly. We've got one more Kahoot question coming your way. The Rapid Dingo holding down the top spot. One more quiz question. How many spacewalks took place on Jessica's mission? Was it 2, 4, 7, or 9? Remember, she said it was more than usual. Usually it might only be a few. So let's see where we end up here. 2, 4, 7, or 9. 6 seconds to lock it in. And then we'll take a look at our podium. All right, 9 spacewalks. Really cool. And I imagine you didn't get to do all 9. Jessica, how many did you get to participate in?
I didn't. Yeah, we take turns, give everybody a chance. So I did 3 of them.
Very cool. All right. Here we go. Let's take a look at our podium. In that 3rd spot, we've got the excited ostrich. Very cool. In 2nd place, we've got the charming turtle. So do we have a brand new leader? Who's holding down that top spot? Oh, the rapid dingo. Held on for the last 2 questions. Very cool. Well, thanks everyone for playing along with us. Now it's time for some more Q&A action. I'm just going to turn that music off and shut down our Kahoot. So keep the questions coming in the chat. I still see lots coming in here, which is great. And before we get some camera classrooms, I just like to bring everybody in. It's fun to see everybody who's hanging out backstage. So give a big wave if you're hanging out and you're ready for some questions. There's a few of our groups. Awesome to see everybody looking good. And we're going to start bringing more of you in. In fact, why don't I keep our grade 5, 6s at St. Michael's in here, and we'll grab a question from you guys. So if you want to grab the mic, we're ready for you. All right. I think we might have to let someone through to get the mic. There we go. Oh, we lost visual. Okay, maybe we'll take a pause. We'll come back to grade 5, 6 and see if they have a question for us. 3, 4s in North Bay. We're ready for you.
I think they're muted.
Yeah, they're working on it. There we go.
Hi, my name is Aiden, and I have a question. What did like feel?
What is gravity?
What is gravity like there?
He wants to know if gravity. How'd you get gravity?
Hi, Aiden. Yeah, so actually, when we're on the International Space Station, we have what we call weightlessness. We don't have the same type of gravity that we have here. So we are still subjected to the gravitational pull of the Earth. And that's actually what keeps us in orbit around in the International Space Station. But since everything is falling back to Earth at the same rate, everything is relative to each other. And that means we basically feel no gravity. We feel weightlessness. We are floating the entire time. Everything around us is floating the entire time with us. So unlike here where you can put something down on a table, if I let this go in space, it would just keep on floating right where I left it.
All right. Thanks, Aiden. That was a great question. Do we have another one handy there in North Bay? And then we'll jump to another group.
Rita? Come here over here, Rita.
Hi, my name is Rita. What's your favorite part of space?
Hi, Rita. I think my favorite part of space, it's a difficult thing to answer because there were so many wonderful, wonderful things. I would say my favorite thing that I did was probably those spacewalks because, as I mentioned, they're really the most rewarding thing that we do. It's such an incredibly unique and special experience. But overall, I'd say really just being weightless, that floating that we were just talking about 24 hours a day, it really just makes life so much more fun. I think it turns us adults into a little bit more like kids your age who tend to have a little bit more fun and play, because when you're floating, everything seems like a lot more fun, like when you saw us passing our food to each other at the dinner table.
All right. Thanks for that great question. Okay, Madame Green's crew are hanging out in British Columbia with us. Let's see how they're doing.
Bodie.
There they are. How you guys doing?
Good. Bodie, your question, please. Who's got it? Forrest, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Forrest. Is it true that you're going to Mars in 2026 or 2027? Could you possibly tell me which one?
Yeah, so, like I mentioned, our long-term goal is to get to Mars. I don't think it will be happening in 2026 or 2027 since that's only a year away. But I think that we will eventually get there. I don't think personally during my career as an astronaut, but hopefully maybe for one of you, maybe we'll get there in time.
All right. We have one more question from BC.
Max, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Max. I have a question. Did you happen to see any sign of aliens in space?
Hi, Max. That's a common question, and sometimes people laugh and think it's kind of funny, but actually, I think it's a really good question because if you think about it in terms of the vastness of space and the size of our solar system and the universe, if we just think about statistics, it's very unlikely that we only have life here on our home planet on Earth. So I would say, without a doubt, there has been or is or will be some kind of life somewhere else in the solar system or the universe. But again, with the size and the dimensions of time, we may not ever actually have proof of that. And it probably doesn't look like the aliens that you see on TV and in movies. But I would say, yes, there's definitely some kind of life out there somewhere.
All right.
I didn't actually see evidence of it, though.
Great questions. Okay, let's zip over to YouTube for a little bit, then we'll grab some more camera classrooms. So, Cesar's joining us in Nicaragua. And the question we have here is, I think he knows how you use the bathroom on the space station, but what if between leaving the planet and getting to the station, you had to use the bathroom? How is that accomplished?
So 2 ways. We actually, when we launch underneath our spacesuits, we actually wear a diaper because we're in that suit for a really long time and you might have to go to the bathroom before you take the suit off. But we also have a toilet on the vehicle that we're in. So in the Soyuz capsule that I flew in, up here in this habitation compartment, there's a little bathroom up here. It works very similarly to the bathroom that on the International Space Station. So if we need to get out here and go to the bathroom, we can. For me, I was only in there for about 6 hours, so I never even took my suit off. So I didn't actually use that bathroom, but sometimes you're in there for longer. Also for the SpaceX Dragon, we also have a toilet in there. So if you need to go before you get to the space station, there is a facility you can use.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter if we're talking to an ocean rower, crossing the Atlantic, or an astronaut. Students always want to know how that's accomplished. It's definitely on their mind. So very cool. Okay. So, Eric would like to know about radio communications. So is there any kind of delay between communications, maybe from the station to Earth? And what about how long would it be from somewhere like Moon or Mars?
Yeah, so right now from the International Space Station, we use a series of communication satellites, same kind of satellites that are used for different applications all around Earth. So those signals, because we have a really high number of satellites in that network, we change over from different satellite to different satellite as we're going around the Earth. So there really isn't much of a delay. There's a tiny little bit of a delay. It used to be a lot longer when we were using fewer satellites, but now that delay is pretty minimal. If I called you from the space station and I could actually call any cell phone, you wouldn't probably even notice that I was in space. But yes, if we talk about going back to the moon and to Mars, then those delays will become much longer. So depending on where you are exactly, on the order of many minutes to hours. So those are things that we have to think about when we're planning the architectures for these future missions.
All right, let's get one more from YouTube and then we'll go back to some camera classes. So Miss Bolly's class is hanging out with us and they're wondering about any misconceptions about being an astronaut that people might not realize.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think, wow, astronauts are just on a different level out here. I could never do that. They're so smart. They're just a different type of person. And that's really not true. We were all just like you. We were all studying math and science as kids in various grades, and we were exploring the world around us. And the only difference is that we had this dream of becoming an astronaut. So I would say for all of you that have that dream or any other dream, you have the tools that you need to accomplish that. You just need to work hard. And like I mentioned, to put yourself out there, to take a risk, because really the dream can come true for anybody. We were all exactly just like all of you.
All right. Mayfield School. Oh, I love seeing all you guys up at the camera. How's everyone doing?
Yay!
All right.
Okay, go
Ready?
Go ahead, Whitney.
I want to know, like, what it felt like when you went back to Earth and, like, felt the gravity.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really interesting experience to come back to Earth because your body is just not used to feeling that gravity at all. We don't notice it, of course, when we're used to it, but when you don't have it for 7 months and you come back, I felt really heavy and quite tired. You kind of feel like the bully out on the playground that sometimes someone's like put their hand on your head and they're pushing you down and you feel like you just feel the gravity. You feel like you're being pushed down into your chair and it makes you feel quite tired as your body really kind of readapts and gets used to it again.
All right. Let's grab another one there. I see someone's got the mic.
What's your favorite space food?
My favorite space food. So we actually have quite a variety of different foods on the space station now, and we have a whole lab here at NASA that's making food all the time. I think for me, some of my favorites were there was an Indian fish curry and there was a Turkish fish stew. There was butternut squash. There was a mango salad that I really liked. There was kale. And you saw some of it in the video, but we have these different packets of food. They're in these dehydrated pouches. So basically all the water has been sucked out of this and then we fly it so it's nice and light without the water. And then we attach a little needle here to our water machine. We fill it back full of water to rehydrate the food again. So we have all kinds of different things ranging from Cheerios. These are some sausage patties. We have different types of food. The Russian Space Agency does a lot of canned meats and items. Those are really yummy as well. So sometimes we'll trade off with our Russian cosmonaut friends. We have even tortillas, just like you might eat at home. This is how we have you saw in the video, some of the drinks. We had a water bag like this, and I had a bubble of water coming out. This one actually has some coffee and cream in it. So we'll fill it up with hot water, and there's our coffee. So all kinds of different varieties.
All right. Thanks, Mayfield. Let's bring our audio crew in Edmonton. You are ready. And I see if you grab the mic, we can grab another question or two. All right, Erskine, if you're there, you want to grab the mic. We'll grab a couple questions.
Hi, Pranav, come here.
There we go.
Pranav has a question.
Can a virus live in space?
Yeah, great question. A virus can definitely live in space in terms of like if I were to carry up a virus in my body, I could certainly transmit it to another human on board the space station. So we actually are very careful about that, where we make sure we have a little quarantine period before we launch, that we want to make sure that we don't carry any viruses up with us. Could a virus survive out in the vacuum of space? And that's actually a great question. And that's something that we're studying recently. We actually did an experiment called microorganisms in space. And we had various microorganisms that we exposed to the external environment of a vacuum and radiation and all those things that it would be subjected to outside of the space station, to try to answer that question and understand more about what kinds of microorganisms can withstand in the space environment.
All right. Do you have another question there? I'll bring you back in.
Yes, Zane has a question.
Do you think we're going to visit all the planets in our solar system eventually?
I'm not sure that we'll visit all of the planets because depending on the type of planets, for example, if we want to have a planet that has a hard surface that we want to go put a lander on and walk around on, like Mars, for example, we can do that on Mars. We can't do that on some of the other planets, like the gas giants that are really just balls of very, very hot gas. So I think it depends on what you mean by visit. If you mean by sending different spacecraft, we actually have been to many of the planets already to sample, to take pictures, to be in orbit around those planets. We've landed on other planets like Mars, and hopefully eventually we'll have humans on other planets in the future as well.
All right. Zipping back to some YouTube questions. Let's see. Mr. Mayo's class is hanging out with us in Connecticut, and they want to know, could you bring any special things from Earth to help make it more comfortable?
Yeah, we could. Since we're up there for such a long period of time, NASA does a pretty good job of supporting us in terms of psychological health because, you want to have some kind of creature comforts from home. And you also have this incredible opportunity to help share this mission with other people. And so you have a small amount of space where you can bring up your personal items to either maybe fly something for a loved one or maybe a banner from your university to represent that chapter of your life. So I did a lot of that. I flew banners from the different universities I attended. I flew some personal things like my panda bear I'd had since I was 5 years old. That was pretty special for me to bring him to space as well. We fly photos of other people so that we can take pictures of them in the cupola, like as if they were there with us, things like that. So yes, we do have a small amount of space to get creative and think about what we want to bring with us.
All right, great question. Okay, Miss Koch's class would like to know, this is Zoe specifically, about trash. What happens to trash on the space station?
So you saw those cargo vehicles that we talked about. And after we get all the cargo out of those vehicles, we put our trash inside those vehicles, we release them, and then they actually burn up in the atmosphere so that we're getting rid of our trash that way. There are also the cargo vehicles, like I mentioned, the SpaceX Dragon, which if we want to bring other items back, it's not trash that we want to just dispose of, it can land in the ocean and we can bring different pieces that way. But most of the trash we get rid of is burning up in the atmosphere in those vehicles.
Okay. So Miss Martell's class is joining us and they're curious about, you were in space for 205 days, which I think seems like a long time. So they're wondering, why so long? Why were you in space for so long?
Yeah, well, actually, it went by really quickly. And as I mentioned, I would have rather stayed longer. I think, you know how it is when you're really busy and you're really excited about what you're doing, time passes very, very quickly. We designed the space station missions that way, really just, I think it conceptually, we're launching humans up about every 6 months. It gives them a period of time to acclimatize to the space environment and to get a lot of work done. It costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of work to launch a rocket and people into space. And so when we have this orbiting laboratory where we can conduct these really cutting edge experiments, we want to be able to make the most of that time. And so that's why the engineers and the architects here at NASA decided a 6-month mission is probably a good amount of time in order to really get a lot done on the space station.
And I think that brings us to a follow-up here. This is another classroom, Miss Britt's crew, and they're wondering, you're in a tight space with a small group of people. Did, any arguments or disagreements in space?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to consider. And it's very important to everything that we do here at NASA, even now in how we select astronauts. We want to make sure that we select astronauts that are good team players, that people can work well together, work well with others, because we want to avoid any really big conflicts. But of course, you can imagine, just like with your loved ones at home, your brothers and sisters, your parents, your friends at school, every once in a while, there's going to be a disagreement, especially when you're with each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You never go home, you never get a break. And so we actually train astronauts how to deal with these types of things. We do different types of training programs like the analog environments that I was talking about, living underwater, living in a cave, going on backpacking expeditions together, so that we can start understanding our own behaviors that might be annoying to other people and how to really deal with those things in order to be a good team player. So yes, of course, those things happen, but the good thing is that when you're prepared for them and when you have strong communication skills and you can talk about it afterward and resolve those problems, you can still come out as friends. And that's certainly what we did. I think we were friends going into the mission, and we were even more bonded and even better friends when we got back to Earth.
Awesome. Well, we're almost at a wrap for today's session, which has flown by fast, which always happens when we have lots of questions and an exciting speaker. But I am going to we have a few more classrooms. A few had to duck out for recesses and lunch, but we've got a few more with us. So we'll get a couple more camera classroom questions. And then we'll sign off for today. So Madame Green, British Columbia, if you guys have one more for us, we'll squeeze another one in.
How hard is it to move in space?
It's not hard at all to move in space because of that weightlessness environment. All you have to do is impart a tiny little bit of motion. So I can just push off a wall lightly, and I will keep on moving until I counteract that motion. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to move. You just have to really kind of get used to making those movements really graceful, because you're not really used to moving that way down here on Earth.
All right. Thanks, Madame Green's crew. You guys are awesome. Thanks for the questions. North Bay. Let's see if there's one more in North Bay.
You got a question? No, we don't have one.
That's okay. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, North Bay. Oh, we do? All right.
What's your question?
Have you ever been in the lava? Like, have you seen the lava?
I didn't understand that.
Have you seen lava and dinosaurs or fossils?
Have you seen lava
I
from
see.
space?
Lava from space. Yeah, you can see volcanic eruptions, especially past volcanic eruptions from space, because the perspective that you have when you're 250 miles or 400 kilometers away, if you're down on Earth and you're standing in a lava field, you might not notice you're in a lava field because everything's the same color. But if you go 250 miles away, you then can kind of see the center of the volcano and how it's this black field all the way around it. You certainly can see that from space, and you can even see active volcanoes erupting. There is actually one case where an astronaut on board the space station saw a volcano erupting before anyone on Earth knew it was even happening, because he happened to be flying over right at that time.
All right. Very cool. Thanks, 3rd and 4th graders. Have a good weekend. All right. One more stop in Edmonton. If you want to go ahead, you guys put so many great questions in the chat, but you'll have to pick your favorite one.
Oh, Marta's question is, how much time did you need to get used to space when you got there?
Yeah, I would say that depends on the person. But for me, I felt really comfortable with that environment right when I got up there. It takes a few days to get graceful at floating around, like I mentioned. Some people actually have what's called space motion sickness, where they feel a little bit sick when they first get there, and they might have some nausea and some vomiting. I didn't have that, but for those people that have it, it usually only lasts for a few days, and then their body really adjusts quite quickly. So I'd say for the average person, maybe 3 to 5 days. If they're feeling sick, they feel normal after that. Within a week or two, you're starting to feel really comfortable floating around, and then you just get better and better as the time goes by.
All right. Thank you so much, Erskine Johnson Public School in Ottawa. I mixed you up with our Edmonton crew, so that's our Ottawa crew. Very cool. Well, Jessica, I'm going to start off with a huge shout out to our classrooms. We had so many great groups joining us from all over the place. They sent in amazing questions, played some Kahoot with us. It was great to see the camera classrooms. A shout out to, I know Heidi's backstage helping pull some of the strings. So very cool. And then Jessica, thank you so much. It's a busy schedule. I know you have training and all kinds of other obligations and appearances and things like that. So thank you so much for spending some time with all of our students in classrooms today.
Wonderful to be here. So excited to get all of these great questions. Keep on studying those STEM fields, and hopefully we'll see you here at NASA one day. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. There's still a couple classrooms with us backstage. If you guys want to give a big wave, there we go. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. We're going to sign off for today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.